And we are live.
Awesome. Been really looking forward to this.
Me too. Keeping my
Welcome.
phone handy because I've got my list of what we're going to talk about in our chat on the Discord. But
So this is episode 41, Theology Part 2. For those of us who were not with us last time, we went over the basics of theology and the basic definitions that we're working with for this show.
Yeah, I would say we went over a lot of definitions. I ended up not rewatching like I'd meant to, but that's fine. Yeah, we went over a lot of definitions, a lot of kind of nature of the divine type stuff.
Yep. So really looking forward to this show. Like I said, thank you. I believe it was Snow who originally suggested the impetus for this topic.
I believe so. That's a very Snow thing to do.
Mm-hmm. So let me pull up the prayer and we can get to things.
Please do.
Hail, sons and daughters of Muspelheim, hail fire itself. Hail, eldest ancestor. Hail, Mikkel Elderveter, hail Elderveter. Hail Suna, hail Loki, hail Glut, hail Logi, hail Sart, hail Sinmora. Hail, eldest ancestor. Hail, Mikkel Elderveter, hail Elderveter. Best du heil. Thank you, eldest ancestor, for cleansing me within and without. Thank you for cleansing all the ways between us. Thank you for blessing and cleansing the space. Thank you for bringing the gods and sisters in Vatir into a good place. Bless du heil. All right. For tonight's prayer, this is a prayer I actually wrote for Maleck for the alcohol spirits.
That's a good one.
Hail to the alcohol spirits. Mead, wine, beer, ale, vodka, whiskey, absinthe, moonshine, to the brewed, distilled, and fermented ones. Hail to the Kvasir's kin, brewed by blood and spit, made with magic and Megan. Hail to yeast's children, who feast upon sugar and convert its contents, yielding the blessed brews. Hail to the living spirits who gift insight and intuition through imbibing, intoning the seer through your songs. Hail to the holy spirits who bring vision and virtue in verse, clearing the way for the poet's power. Hail to the wandering spirits who have crossed the worlds in wonder, courage, and camaraderie, following your course. Hail to the power-wielding spirits whose bodies bear magic, Megan, and medicines, sharing strength sustained through your sacrifice. Hail to the generous ones whose offered liquor brings luck. Worthy gift in Gabo to the Ginregen. Hail to the alcohol spirits, cider, lager, tequila, gin, liqueur, cognac, brandy, bitters, to the brewed, distilled, and fermented ones. Bless du heil.
Cheers.
Cheers in a hot second. These little shots are offerings.
Yep, take your time. Meanwhile, we've got Emily Hall and Finn in the chat. Hey, y'all. And Finn, it's nice to see you. It's been a while.
It's been a long while. Good to see you, Finn. Have I created a friction fire? No. Have I tried? Yes.
Finn said Sarenth has created a friction fire, and no, Sarenth has tried. Which is fine. It's a new skill.
Oh, man. Well, that and I also have given myself about a week of rest because I damn near broke myself doing it.
Yeah. you pushing too hard? This is my shock choice.
Oh, hush you. I'm working on it.
So, was there anything that you wanted to start off with, or
technically the match strike is friction? Oh, Jesus.
That's true.
You're not wrong. You're a smart ass, but you're not wrong.
True. Was there anything you wanted to start off with, or did you want to just jump right into it?
So what I remember us covering last time was, like I said, a lot of basic definitions, but also some of the basics around discernment and theology and why these things are so damn important. Remembering less as the evening went on because drinking is a thing. So as far as, hey, Kat, I think that getting out of the basic definitions and what theology in a polytheist context actually means, because when a lot of people hear the word theology, what they're hearing is a lot of Christian overtones around meaning making with regards to very particular forms of Christianity.
Yeah.
And theosology, the study of the gods, is ancient Greek in origin. The etymology dates back to polytheist philosophers.
Mm-hmm. Which I do want to actually mention. Snow rightly called us on that we did not distinguish well last time between theology and philosophy.
Yes.
And
so let's do that now.
Honestly, I was going to say I probably will continue to not, because in a polytheist context, I don't think that there is a ton of distinction.
I would agree with that, especially because with the early philosophers, they're freely commenting on ontology, cosmology, cosmogony, and all the rest, while also talking about the basic building blocks of the universe. That's like kind of what the dialogues of Plato and various other Platonists are all about.
Or I should clarify, not polytheist, animist theology, because those are distinct things, even though I often tie them together, but they're not.
I mean, for me, like, you don't have polytheism without animism, so it's kind of like, yeah. The gods are big spirits. I think that part of the divorce between philosophy and theology was Christianity, pretty much from the get-go, especially because the way that polytheist theologians of the time dealt with them, or philosophers, depending on how you see these guys, was the popular thing at the time was to say that the Christians were atheists because they didn't believe in all these other gods. They either thought they were demons or they thought they didn't exist. So I think to a degree, the separation between religion and culture in no small part began as a response to monotheism, particularly Christianity, because what little I've read, they don't really respond to the Jews because the Jews do their own damn thing. And a lot of them still end up offering to the emperor's genius, despite the various revolts and riots of the time.
Yeah.
So a lot of Roman culture continues apace as normal until this uprising Christian sect decides to just start shit with everybody.
Yeah. And it should be, so two disclaimers that I want to start off with. We are talking from a Eurocentric, primarily like Roman and Greek Hellenic
history,
philosophical history. And also, neither of us are like academics or experts in this field, and our thoughts and opinions are our own. And
religious studies was my minor, folks.
Yeah. Like, we both know a fair amount for lay people, but the fact is,
we are no experts on the matter. Yeah. And we are giving a very, very baldlerized, very bare bones overview. So read your history books. The Great Courses series is actually really excellent in a lot of ways. I heavily recommend, if you folks want good audiobooks, go to them. They're the ones I listen to for a lot of this stuff.
Yeah. And
it's really fascinating when you like start picking apart this particular arguments that they use against Christians. And the big one that, again, they return to again and again is, well, y'all are atheists, and you're claiming to just worship one more god than an atheist does. You're kind of the same in both.
Which is
hilarious because that's Dawkins' argument as well in the modern times. Like, Christians or atheists, they just have one more god than we do. And I'm like, wow. So you're not only inaccurate, but you're a douche canoe to boot. Okay, understood.
Yeah, it's
Dawkins.
Yeah. Anyway, sorry.
You have notes.
Yeah, well, calling them notes is overly generous. They are vague topic ideas.
You got better than what I did.
I'm also still very much trying to get my brain on track. I spent a lot of the day doing a bunch of yard work, so I'm like,
okay.
Yeah, it's not like I'm exhausted. It's more like gear switching.
Yep.
Things that I particularly wanted to cover today. One, queer theology. It's Pride Month. Happy Pride.
Yay!
From two queer people.
Right.
Pride.
Happy Pride, folks.
The role of the practitioner in the faith or cosmology.
Ooh. Okay.
And polycentrism and the compatibility or incompatibility of multiple faith systems and cosmologies. In particular, as it relates to like interfaith households and or one person carrying multiple traditions or etc.
Right.
Happy Pride, all.
Yee.
Is there any of those three that you wanted to hit first?
List them off again, will you?
Queer theology.
The
place of the practitioner in practice, and polycentrism. Right. The compatibility or incompatibility of multiple cosmologies.
So I think they kind of all dovetail really well together, but I think queer theology should go last because the other two build it up.
That's fair. Yeah.
So do you want to tackle what you mean by polycentrism in polytheism?
So this is polycentrism is a term that I stole from online spaces that I'm in. I believe it's
Dr. Edward Butler's phrase.
Was it coined by Butler?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
That's kind of unfortunate in my eyes because I'm not a fan of Butler. I think he's a middling philosopher and theologian, and he's in bed with some shitty people. Just being flat out about it. He's in bed with some shitty people. We don't endorse that.
Hindu for dirtbags.
Yeah. So what I am talking about with this is related to the idea that, as I understood it from how I've heard it online, which is the idea as I kind of understood it was sorry, I am trying to think of how to explain this. My brain is not firing on these cylinders.
It's okay. Do you want me to pick this up?
Please.
Okay. So polycentric polytheism posits that there are multiple avenues to the truth, and that unlike omnitheism, which says that all paths to the divine, all paths of understanding the gods are valid, polycentric polytheism says that truth can exist in multiple places at once, and that ultimate truth as such is not necessarily contained within either a whole, a sum, or parts. Polycentric polytheism means that I can stand in the truth that Zeus is a god, that Odin is a god, and that these two have very different ways of running their particular ships, and that they both have cosmologies and cosmogonies that are true unto themselves.
Right. Damn it. I'm having just...
You're having a day.
Yeah, right. The kind of the reason that it's polycentrism, right, is that to kind of speak in metaphor, if the truth is the center of the universe, right, the idea of polycentrism is that there are multiple truths and each one is the center of the universe in its own right at once.
It is an idea that is heavily influenced / borrowed from Platonism, because Platonism is one of the most coherent theologies we have, because reconstructing Stoicism requires some fucking work, to be perfectly blunt about it, although Stoicism also has room for this.
Yeah. It's also, from my understanding, pretty heavily influenced by Hindu and Vedic thought. With
process theology as well.
Yeah. With the example that is often cited along with this, at least in the circles that I'm in online, is the story of Indra's net, which I don't recall well enough to relay accurately, but is roughly that the Hindu deity god Indra has a net covered in jewels. Each jewel reflects the others, and it's a metaphor for polycentrism, right? For each god is the universe in and of itself, and this does not detract from each of the others also being the universe in and of themselves.
Yep.
Which is complicated and a little mind-breaking, but it's the divine. So that's all well and good in theory, right? But in practice, this gets a little hinky when you think about some theologies are fine with this and some theologies are not, right?
Right.
So
for the most part, polytheist theologies don't have this issue of disagreement purely because they don't feel the need to. These aren't exclusivist religions, and generally speaking, animist religions don't have this issue either, because again, it's not that it doesn't matter. It's that the exclusive provenances they ascribe to the gods, generally speaking very broadly here, even when they overlap, they do not in any way, shape, or form detract or deny the existence of other gods. The theology just doesn't have this exclusivist issue inside of it.
Yeah. Or at least it shouldn't. You do find pockets of online pagans who are very insistent on sticking to, well, I worship these gods from this pantheon, which means I can't talk to those other gods. And it's like, real talk, like taboos against talking to other gods is a fine thing for yourself. If you try to make it a normative, that's where the thing breaks. Oh, and this isn't taboos. This is more of, oh, well, I'm a Norse pagan, therefore I worship the Norse gods and I don't deal with the Greek gods. They basically don't exist.
That's just shit philosophy and theology, to my opinion. Where I understand people is I can't deal with all that extra shit. I'm just trying to have a coherent worldview over here. I get that.
Mm-hmm.
While also I worship gods from multiple culture groups. So, I don't call them pantheons anymore because pantheons as such are constructed. And the more that you look into what a pantheon is supposed to do, the less the model makes sense. It's kind of like trying to apply de Maisel and the tripartite theology philosophy idea thingy that he tried shoehorning everybody into.
Yeah, tripartite theory, which is just garbage.
It only works when you make it work.
Yeah.
When you shoehorn gods into roles that doesn't fit or ignores their particular history. Like, fuck the myths. Like, the history of how these gods are worshipped doesn't fit with the tripartite philosophy for the most part. The tripartite theory, excuse me.
You're good.
But again, this is also a thing where when you artificially try to cram gods into categories that may or may not work, you might be working usefully for you as an organizing principle, but where the rubber really meets the road is in lived relationship. So the question at the end of the day is, polycentric polytheism's practical use is that it allows for a variety of relationships to flourish simultaneously without diminishing others.
Mm-hmm.
And it also allows you to pursue different interests concurrent with those gods, because you might have a worship relationship with Thor that is very surface level and a very deep relationship with, say, Freyr, which is not only worshipful, but also involves a lot of spirit work to boot. And polycentric polytheism allows for different levels of involvement and relationship, whereas a strict adherence to a hierarchy and only these gods are worshipped in this fashion, it can get dicey quick.
Yeah. And where this gets even further complicated is in the lived relationships, a lot of people may feel calls, or even without like an outside call, but merely an internal call, a specific interest in faith backgrounds, theologies, and kind of philosophical and spiritual traditions that are maybe compatible, maybe not, depending with their polytheism. For example, a person that I follow on TikTok who is very, very good at what they do, and I will look up their name after and post a link to their TikTok in the Discord. But they are both Buddhist and Jewish, which to their mind, and them having spoken to both Buddhist elders and rabbis, they have found that their Judaism and their Buddhism are not incompatible. But when they talked about this on TikTok, which obviously TikTok is not a place for the level of nuance that you need to actually have this conversation in depth. But they did mention that that's for them, but there are absolutely cases where that wouldn't necessarily be the case. There are versions of Buddhism that are, polytheist, and versions of Judaism that are strictly monotheist, where that wouldn't work very well. You having a time there?
I want this fucking gin.
Is that the Empress gin?
Yes, it's the Empress gin.
Very nice. Oh, speaking of, what are we drinking tonight?
Oh, well, I started off the evening with Viking Blood, one of my favorites. And then I had the Quiet Man blended Irish whiskey. Fucking amazing stuff.
It is very, very good. I would say, having had the Quiet Man Sunday at your house, that it is a nice. Empress is very good gin too. I will say that flat out. It is very good. It's a little.
This was recommended to me by my friend Cinti, who is amazing.
Yeah. Who we're also going to try to have on the show, but that's a later date. Empress gin is slightly gimmicky in that it's
butterfly pea flower.
Yeah, butterfly pea flower. Jesus, I'm having a time. Which is neat because it's a pH indicator, so it changes color from purple to blue depending on the pH.
Oh, rock on.
It's also just very good gin. The Quiet Man whiskey, I would say, is fine on its own. Definitely is designed to be made in cocktail, or designed to be put in cocktails. But that said, it's not because it's not a good whiskey. I would say it's a good whiskey that is designed to go in cocktails.
Yep, I'd agree. Speaking of which, I'm going to make a cocktail real quick.
And I am drinking Eyeball by Bee Nectar, which is a ginger mead that was aged in rye whiskey barrels, and it's very good. Also, while we're talking about alcohol, Kat's comment, like Old Crow, reminded me.
Yes.
I had some really fantastic at a local cocktail bar the other day. Really fantastic whiskey cocktails that were made with Old Crow, and I was dumbfounded by how good these cocktails are and how Old Crow is bottom shelf whiskey. Like, it is. I know you super enjoy it, but
I love the shit. It is. It isn't a good whiskey. It's not. It comes in big fucking plastic jugs.
Yeah. And yeah, it's these delicious.
You want to get shit faced? It'll send you there.
Right, and it goes to show, you can genuinely make amazing cocktails with bottom shelf whiskey if you know what you're doing. I will say it is the case that better liquor makes better cocktails, but that doesn't mean cheap liquor doesn't make good cocktails as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. As Kat says, makes a damn good old fashioned.
So back to theology.
Yeah, back to the theology that we're talking about. Yeah, so you know, in practice, what do you do when the philosophies and things that you are being called to uh tend in ways that are either incompatible or hard to reconcile?
Hmm.
And the thing that's kind of jumping to my mind is the monotheist versions of Hinduism,
Hmm.
right? Because we generally tend to think of, at least in polytheist circles, tend to think of Hinduism as an unbroken polytheist tradition, and
Which
it's
it
some
is.
versions of it is, but some Hindus genuinely consider themselves monotheist. It's not a Christian style monotheism, but it is fully monotheism as said by the people who practice it,
Hmm.
um, which would be in practice perhaps not, but at least in theory mostly incompatible with my worldview.
Right.
So
It's important to realize where the boundaries of acceptability and truth for your understanding hit,
yeah.
for lack of a better term, because monotheism holds no value for me.
Hmm.
But that doesn't mean that it is valueless necessarily. It just means that there's a certain point at which I can go, neat. And that means jack and shit to me. Cheers.
Right. And I think it also depends heavily on the kind of monotheism,
Right.
right? A kind of
He-
American evangelical
yeah.
monotheism where God is above the world is one thing, whereas a panentheistic monotheism where uh without it leaning into archetypalism, but the entire universe is God, therefore any divine reflections you are seeing are faces of one divine source, could easily consider itself monotheist and may or may not be compatible with, say, my practice or Sarenth's.
This is where interesting kind of go betweens like henotheism get real interesting,
Hmm.
because henotheism is the worship of one God with the acknowledgement of others.
Yeah.
And the important distinction I make with henotheism from monotheism is henotheism doesn't make any truth claims about other religions. It just says I'm worshiping this one.
Yep.
So, that being said, where does the role of the practitioner in the faith and cosmology come into polycentric polytheism?
Mm. I have a thought. I'm thinking how to.
Yep. I'll just sit over here in my Hellcat from a collab between Iron Maiden and Brewdog. Nice.
Brewdog's pretty good. I haven't had Iron Maiden to my knowledge, but Brewdog is pretty solid.
I'd try anything once.
Yeah. I probably, like, honestly, I probably have had something from Iron Maiden and just don't remember because I'm terrible with names. But Brewdog, I remember enough. They make a pretty solid Scotch ale too, and a pretty solid porter. Um. Okay. So
Monolatry, different in faces or aspects, but only one god.
yeah. Or as I've often heard it, monolatry is often also said as there may be multiple gods, but only this one is worth worshiping. Um,
Kind of like Zoroastrianism.
yeah. I am not super familiar with Zoroastrianism, but I have heard that applied there. I'm not saying it is necessarily the case. Again, I don't know Zoroastrianism that well. I've definitely heard it applied to Judaism, although I would say that henotheism is likely a better descriptor for Judaism than monolatry.
Mm-hmm. And again, this also depends on the particular Judaism you're looking at.
Yeah.
Because we've known Hebrew polytheists. So
yes. And okay, so I am going to say that
know and have known, excuse me.
yes. I am going to say that the role, in my opinion, the role of the practitioner is both paradoxically both at the center of cosmology and also after that it depends entirely on what they do as the center of that cosmology, because every practitioner chooses their own cosmology. They choose their own theology. In the end, you choose what you believe. You choose what theology and cosmology you subscribe to. And because of that, you are at the center, right? You are building your own theology, cosmology, building your own religion. And because of that, you're at the center. But then once it's built, which isn't a thing because you're always building it and rebuilding it over and over, right? From then, it depends on where you place yourself, where you sit in that cosmology.
So, surprising probably nobody, because polytheism and animism are existent theologies unto themselves. I'm going to disagree, but this is a difference of process theology versus existent theologies.
Can you define process theology for me real
The
quick?
way that I understand process theology is basically how you described it. You were looking at the cosmologies available to you and glomming what makes sense into a theology, a coherent theology. I'm also going to cheat and look the fucking thing up because I could be completely misremembering because it's been years since I was in college.
Excuse me, please do, because I mean that's important. In the meantime, Emily says, I think of henotheism as many gods but only worshipping one. I think of monolatry as all of the faces or gods are actually part of a single one. But I am also in the woods, so take it with salt, as I cannot currently pull sources. I believe the definition you have for monolatry fits a little bit better with pantheism or panentheism, as I've heard them. But I'm not looking at sources, and also definitions of words change.
So I fucked that up.
Oh,
A theological approach that understands ultimate reality in terms of a dynamic process of becoming an ongoing change. This processive understanding may be contrasted with static notions of being that are based in Aristotelian and scholastic categories. Existence is understood in terms of the mutual interaction of entities through which change occurs. So actually, kind of, but no. I got it a little correct, but it's you are an active agent of change in the theology.
I think you got it more correct than you think you did.
The definition I'm reading off of is from the Episcopal Church. Thanks, guys.
I think the definition you're reading off of is using a much more process theology has cosmology and reality itself as much more subjective than extant theologies do.
Yes.
And that would be kind of the difference there, right? Like, yes, you are consistently building your theology from what is available to you, whether through observation, internal and external, etc., and building reality that way.
But you're also co-creating with, in this case, God, or in our case, the gods or spirits.
Yes.
Which honestly is heathen theology as a process theology, because the very idea of earther is you're co-creating with all other beings.
Yes.
So heathenry, you could argue, is a process theology.
I would say so, or at least the
has elements of it.
Yeah, at least the recon heathen theology that you and I both
right
understand it as. because I will say there is the heavily Christian influenced, please unpack your fucking baggage. Anyway, theology of, oh, well, the gods have determined our fates and it's all written because the Norns laid it all out.
Mm-hmm. The
Some
uber deterministic model.
Yeah, which is not how
That's not how that works.
It's not how that works. It's not how the ancients understood time. Literally, that's not how they understood time. Anyway,
So suffice to say, the role of the practitioner in the faith and cosmology is a center, not the center.
Certainly, and I should have prefaced with, I come from, and part of this is just that I have internalized polycentrism enough that I don't say it anymore, right? Like, me being the center of my own universe and building the universe around me doesn't mean that you're not also doing the same thing, and these are happening concurrently and both true.
Right. Hey, they're my bags, and I'll take them where I go, says Finn. I mean, it's frustrating because it's very limiting of self, and it's also exceptionally limiting of potential for change in positive directions. Because if you are saying to yourself, the universe is fated, determined in such a way that whatever I do does not matter, that invites, to be perfectly blunt, like intellectual and other forms of laziness or laissez-faire. And
it does, yeah.
It doesn't make anything improve for anyone. And the only reason that anyone would stick to that kind of a theology or philosophy is if they're privileged.
Yeah.
Because that's the only people that benefits.
And it's to my mind, there is a significant amount of shirking of responsibility in that kind of theology. Because, well, it's already fated, so it doesn't matter what I do, right? I can't change it. I'm not responsible for it. It's already done.
I think we can believe in fixed points of time or in fixed points of the universe that are going to happen. Like, for instance, the Ragnarok cycle is going to happen. How that happens, where that happens, if it happens at all, is a matter of whether or not the conditions are correct for it, I think.
Yeah.
Because mythological time is weird like that.
Yeah, and also I think that a lot of that theology comes back to, and I think that this comes back to Christian baggage again, but it comes back to mythic literalism, with at least for Norse pagans, with interpretations of Ragnarok as being both literal and literally fated, right? A foretold prophecy that must happen, and must happen in exactly this way, rather than an interpretive story about interactions, and also a, hey, when society breaks down, bad shit happens. This is why society is important and relationships are important.
This also gets into the issue with millenarian theology in general. And millenarian is basically end of the world religion.
Mm-hmm.
And these tend to pop up when shit gets really desperate. You can look at the Ragnarok mythological cycle as reflecting a millenarian attitude in the end of what is commonly called the Viking Age, but the end of Nordic ancient heathen religions.
Yeah.
And cultures would have felt this extreme pressure during the period in time when these myths would have been written down, or would have been just after when they were written down. Also keeping in mind that millenarian movements such as the Ghost Dance, believe aspects of the Boxer Rebellion, and more current with our time, the various evangelical movements which are insisting that the apocalypse is right around the corner.
As Finn says, for Inception.
Yeah, that.
There are a lot of actual doomsday cults in
Christianity has millenarianism built into its function without the theology functions, because I don't know any Christian theology that discounts the revelation of St. John. So
there are some. There are some.
They are few and far fucking between.
Absolutely, right. They are certainly not the mainstream, and certainly not the ones that get attention. But they do exist. A lot of liberation theologies either are discount it entirely or interpret it in very different ways. But I mean, that's true of most liberation theologies. They seem to be very much at odds with mainstream evangelicalism and even mainstream Catholicism.
Yeah, liberation theology and Catholicism is an interesting beast, especially when you look at the Society of St. Ignatius of Loyola.
I'm not familiar.
Commonly called the Jesuits.
Oh,
The Jesuits are a fun fucking bunch because they start off as this really like
fucky bunch of apologists that
and they have turned into basically the leftist liberal arm of the Catholic Church, who are heavy into liberation theology in the 60s and 70s. They're kind of, a lot of them are Catholic counterculturalists.
Yep.
And having known a few members of the order, they are interesting people.
Yeah.
Often holding what the church would consider heretical views. They're fun.
Right.
Sorry.
No, you're fine. A lot of the Christians that I know who interpret Revelation in a what I think is a very good way, leaving aside the, as Fen mentioned, the historical interpretation of it, which is a whole thing that we're not going to get into because we're focusing on polytheism, not monotheism. But many of the people that I follow, like online, who are talking about this, they just don't believe in hell at all. Right. They're Christians who don't believe in hell, which, yeah, their theology is their own. I'm with them. I think it's wonderful. I think it's beautiful. And I absolutely love the work that they're doing. It's not my work, but.
So leaving aside Christian theology, if you don't mind me kind of.
Oh, please do.
The thing that I think is most important about understanding the role of the practitioner in the faith and cosmology is that you're an involved party just as much as anybody else is. And that your center and how big that center is depends on your spheres of influence. Mm-hmm. And this is where, to my mind, the issue of gods or big spirits or whatever placeholder name you want to use really comes into focus, because the larger spheres of influence have more gravitational drag on the rest of the centers. It doesn't mean that they're more or less important. It just means that their pull is bigger.
Yeah. I very much tend to agree. I very much tend towards, as Cinti and Diana put it, consent is sacred, and that holds true for every relationship, including that with the divine. And that means that, like, I mean, even just speaking from personal experience, there are gods that I've said no to. There are gods that I've full on cut contact with. Gods that were very important to me. Damn it, I lost the thought. Anyway,
well, quick interlude. I'm trying this North Forest huckleberry vanilla liqueur because it sounds tasty.
That stuff is quite good. Yeah, no, that's quite good. I had a little bit of it on Sunday.
Ooh. Oh, man.
It's not the smoothest cream liqueur out there, but it is quite tasty. They did get a good flavor profile out of it. But it doesn't taste artificial, in my opinion, which is
which is fucking amazing.
Yeah. But yeah, and that's actually one thing that I particularly enjoy about heathen theology, at least as I understand it, and subscribe to, is that while the influence level, like you said, right, the gravitational pull, for example, would be the same, the fact is my choices are my own, and my choices do matter.
And this is why humans matter in polycentric polytheism.
Mm-hmm.
Because, yes, our gravitational pull might be smaller, but is not insignificant.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's important, I think, because it's an answer to, it's not the only answer to, there are other answers to this question. But it is a very good, in my opinion, heathen answer, and generally polytheist answer, I think, because I think this works for multiple polytheisms, not just heathen polytheism. The problem of evil, which is, I think, a thing that all theists must reckon with. Whether or not it applies, I think it is a
Right.
question that all theists must reckon with at some point.
Oh, I agree. I agree. I just don't think that the problem of evil is an issue in polytheism as such.
I think it depends on your polytheism.
My apologies. Apparently, inclusive or pluriform monotheism is what I was attempting to describe. Maleck's monolatry definition is accurate.
Oh, okay, cool. Thank you for looking that up, Emily. I genuinely appreciate the confirmation. Like, I was not trying to
Same.
just like this was my understanding, and I frankly very much appreciate you coming in with sources that you looked up. Like, that's very nice. Also, inclusive or pluriform monotheism. I'm gonna look that up later because I think on the surface it seems pretty straightforward what that means, but I do want to dig into who's doing that at the very least.
Pluriform is like multiform monotheism. What the fuck?
And I think it's inclusive monotheism, right? It's this is my understanding of God. That doesn't mean it's every understanding of God. Yours is just as valid as mine. Is what I think that means. I don't know for sure that's what that means, but that makes sense. Or as Emily put it earlier, all of the faces or gods are actually part of a single one. So pretty close to it. Actually, probably developed out of Platonism after Platonism was taken over by the by Christianity.
So Encyclopedia Britannica actually has an excellent definition.
Okay.
Pluriform monotheism is one of the efforts to solve the problem of the coexistence of divine unity and divine pluriformity, the multiplicity of forms, which was not recognized by an older generation of scholars, although part of the material was already available. So, yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah, it's probably it probably comes out of historically it probably comes out of Platonism because Platonism is all about the forms, right?
Apparently alislam.org also has a definition, which I'm going to read if you don't mind.
Yes, please.
So monotheism is the belief in one God. A narrower definition of monotheism is the belief in the existence of only one God that created the world, is all-powerful and intervenes in the world. A distinction may be made between exclusive monotheism and both inclusive and pluriform panentheistic monotheism, which, while recognizing various distinct gods, postulates some underlying unity. Monotheism is distinct from henotheism, a religious system in which the believer worships one God without denying that others may worship different gods with equal validity, and monolatrism, the recognition of the existence of many gods, but with the consistent worship of only one deity. It was first used by Julius Wellhausen, monolatry was. The broader definition of monotheism characterizes the traditions of Babism, the Baha'i faith, Balinese Hinduism, Cao Dai, which is Cao Daism, Chondoism, I hope I'm saying that correctly. It's Chinese, I believe. Christianity, Deism, Ekankar, Hindu sects such as Shaivism and Vaishnavism, Islam, Judaism, Mandaism, Rastafari, Seicho Nale, Sikhism, Tengrism, Tenrikyo, Yazidism, and Zoroastrianism, elements of pre-monotheistic thought are found in early religions such as Atanism, ancient Chinese religion, and Yahwism. So, thank you, alislam.org.
Yeah. So, theology is complicated and has a very long history, and it gets more complicated the more you think about it, and exponentially more complicated the more that you read about it and the history of it.
So let's dive into how this intersects with queer theology. Because if we understand ourselves as being centers, and we're queer people, we can affect how that center functions.
I want to back up for 1 second before we dive into that.
Please.
I do want to...
You take a breather. I'm going to open this Jackson Morgan.
Yeah, you do.
This is Scottish cream. Creamy Scots. So, yeah. It's a Jackson Morgan Southern Cream. I've never had this before. So, and this is probably the first forum where I've actually talked about queer theology. So it's a first for everybody.
Yeah.
Ooh, that's good.
I think, right, responsibility. heathen theology, your actions matter. Perhaps not to the degree that the gods do, but they do still matter. And it's worth noting that there are heathen theologies where the theology that I'm talking about is based on not omnipotent gods. There are heathen theologies where omnipotent gods are still the case. And these, my
I will
understanding,
note this does not comport with my understanding whatsoever of the gods.
it doesn't with mine either, but that doesn't make it invalid, right?
Oh no! Just because it's not within my wheelhouse and not my understanding doesn't mean that it's inherently wrong. I'm just going to disagree with it.
Right.
I'm going to say it's wrong for me.
Mm-hmm.
It may not be wrong for thee.
Right. And I would say that, like, for example, my answer to the problem of evil is that, well, my gods are not omnipotent and every person is free to make their own choices. And as a consequence of that, evil exists.
Yeah. That's basically where I come out.
I would also, actually, that would be the simple answer. The more complicated answer would be that evil as a capital E thing, evil does not exist. Rather, negative outcomes for individual things exist because, etc. Like suffering exists, but evil does.
Philosophical evil exists. Theological evil does not, to my mind. If that makes any distinctive difference to you.
Can you explain?
So, when people think of evil with a capital E, they think Satan. And they think of some great created being that tempts and does harm. I think the truth of the situation is that people just sometimes make shitty choices. And they make them for a myriad of reasons.
Okay. So, evil as an effect, not a cause.
Yes. Evil is an effect of choices, not an underlying cause in the universe.
Gotcha.
So, for instance, it was not a good thing for Ymir to have died so that the worlds could be made, strictly speaking, because harm was done to his body. However, depending on your understanding of Ymir, he might have been a fucking tyrant and a horrible, horrible being and needed to be put down. So, killing of Ymir is a good in the aggregate. Because I'm more of a consequentialist in my philosophy, I look at the net good of what comes out of issues, which is why when it comes to things like politics, I ask, what is the result? Not what's the intention.
Yeah.
I am not a Kantian. I am not in that the intentions must always be pure. I am much more concerned with what results from the mindset as opposed to what the mindset is unto itself, which is why capital E evil doesn't make a whole lot of sense in my mind, because evil is what we call the application of harm to people, beings, and the environment. I could look at a destroyed forest that has been clear cut as evil. The capitalist sees good because he sees his portfolio going up.
Yeah.
And some people will say, well, that's just relativism, isn't it? And I said, no, I can manifestly tally the damage that's been done to the land, the soil, the sky, the seas. And I can say manifestly that what the capitalist there is doing is evil, while their intentions may have been good in generating revenue, generating jobs, and doing all these wonderful things for the community they're part of. The end result is that evil is a result of negligence, abuse, and wrong-headed decision-making. And it's an effect, not a cause.
Yeah. No, I see that. I tend to agree. Generally speaking, we could get into like specific debates.
It's why my teeth itch when people say there's evil spirits. Well, what the fuck does that mean?
Yeah.
Because if your theology is not developed to the coherence of being able to explain what the fuck an evil spirit means, then you're not really saying anything. You're making a value judgment. You're not making a judgment based on the effect the spirit's having. If the person being afflicted by the spirit is manifesting with scratches, if the person being afflicted by the spirit is manifesting with their life falling to complete and total shit, we can say, sure, that's pretty evil shit. But maybe your ancestors did some things that you need to pay for.
Yeah. Or, and I also think of it, I tend to think less in terms of good and evil and more in terms of harm and benefit, right?
My problem with evil and good is that it short circuits critical thinking.
Yeah.
Not that the value judgments themselves are inherently bad unto themselves. I think that you can say this is an evil act and that's a good act, and you can be justified within that. The problem being is that it short circuits the ability to process what the fuck is actually going on. Why is this evil? Why is this good? If you can't explain that to me, then you're using evil and good as thought stoppers.
Yeah,
you're not saying anything.
And using the evil versus like harmful spirit as an example, right? Like, it doesn't particularly matter to me whether or not what the inherent nature of the spirit is. What matters to me is the relationship in the moment, right? Like, okay, this spirit is currently causing harm. It is attached to my friend and it is hurting them. Can I talk to the spirit? If yes, I'm going to talk to the spirit. If it's going to listen to me, great. We can have that conversation and hopefully get things resolved. If that's not going to work, well, that spirit may or may not be evil in a grand scheme of things. I am a very limited perspective. I can't say for sure. What I can say for sure is I'm going to do something about the fact that that spirit is hurting my friend. Hey, cat.
About tired of the ancestor shit. Yeah, I get it.
Yeah. We're all tired of the ancestor shit. It's fine.
Trust. Your ancestors are fucking loud. Can you please talk to them?
Also, love my ancestors. Here's y'all.
Hail to the ancestors.
This actually gets into is a bit of a side segue into it, but is
sure
an interesting part of queer theology. Because queer theology to me is not merely the presence or absence of queer gods or queer people, queer spirits, whatever. It is an inherently revolutionary take on theology.
I think that going to the kind of base of what queer means is actually really important. So queer is to be transverse. It is to abrogate. It is to be uncanny. And I think that's really important because most heathen gods are in some way, shape, or form queer. And queering the body, for instance, is something that has been noted by like Rune Rasmussen caught so much fucking shit for this, but I think he was absolutely spot on talking about Odin as a queer god through his disability, because disability inherently queers a person. Think of it like you are transversing, you are across the grain because you are suddenly other through this disability, through this expression of physicality. Queerness in and of itself is an abrogation of norms. It is a revolution against what is accepted as supposed to be normal. And why is it such a big deal that Odin loses his eye or Thor has to cross-dress? Because you're abrogating norms. Norse gods do this shit all the fucking time. So most of the gods, I can safely say, are queer because they abrogate the norms of society internally and externally all the time.
Sorry, I'm still sitting with, and this is an internal struggle, and I'm recognizing that and vocalizing that I am internally struggling with. I think it's just internalized ableism, but that's not the point.
To a certain degree, that actually is, because queering the body necessarily abrogates the norms by which we understand disability.
Yeah, no, and that's fair. And I think that's the thing that I'm sitting with is
I am happy that I am just drunk enough to have this conversation and still sober enough to have it coherently.
Right? No kidding. Well, and I mean that's in large part the point of the show, right? Is the relaxing and
we're abrogating our own boundaries in a certain very real sense, in a sacred space.
Like the lowering of inhibition and the more free flowing thought that comes from the imbibing of alcohol, which is not me saying that you need to imbibe alcohol to have these discussions. That's not what I'm saying.
Any more than we would say that you must take CBD or mushrooms to have a spiritual experience. No.
Right.
Certainly not. And I'm also not saying tear your fucking eye out because that's queer theology.
No.
I am saying that if you lose an eye, if you lose an ear, if you have these things happen to you. The gods have a place for you because the gods must have a place for themselves. Please go ahead.
I think that everything you were saying is good and true. But I think that it's also how to say. I think that pack theology is inherently queer.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that despite the fact that, one, we don't have an extant mythos, we're working on that. That's beside the point. And frankly, none of our gods are anthropomorphized enough. And I'm using the term gods here very loosely.
Let's just call them big spirits if that's more comfy.
It is. None of our spirits are anthropomorphized enough.
No, they're not, and that is the beauty of writing prayers for them.
It really is. But they're not anthropomorphized enough to where things like disability can be applied to them even in mythos. And certainly things like sexuality and gender cannot be applied to them rightly, even in mythos. That gets a little complicated because of how we refer to them, although many of them insist on changing pronouns pretty consistently.
Right, but pronouns are not sexuality, and sexuality aren't pronouns.
No. But also, getting kind of back to my original statement, queer theology is, in my opinion, inherently revolutionary. It is.
Yes.
It is theology that not just does not fit with, but challenges the status quo and
as a necessity. Yes.
And strives for a more inclusive, consistently, always more inclusive, right? There is not a most inclusive, there is not a capital I inclusive, where it is consistently and always striving to be inclusive, to be more inclusive.
Right.
And I think that that's the thing, right? Like, and that's the thing with pack theology is pack theology challenges the status quo. It says things like, we cannot exist as individuals. We only exist in context. We only exist in community. Even if I am in this house by myself, physically by myself, except I'm also not, because this house is here. I am in community with the spirits of the land under my feet and the walls around me.
Right. So by a very baseline definition, queer theology exists as a liminal space within theology unto itself, to my understanding, because queer theology takes a look at theology and says, what is transverse? Because the normative theology of the moment is individualism, at least as far as modern American Western standards go. I am an individual. I am a single soul. I am the only thing that exists. The thing that is driving my meat suit is the only soul, the only thing that matters. Queer theology dispenses with that shit, either by denying that there is a soul, or by saying there's a multipartite soul, or by denying the particulars of that. And then, because queer theology is not merely a sexual or gendered perspective on the soul, it cuts across the grain. The reason it's revolutionary is because it is inclusive, into my mind.
Yeah. No, and that's
radically so.
Right, and it's increasing. It's always and increasingly striving to be inclusive, and that's the part that makes it inherently liminal. Because I think that's the thing. Even if queer theology became the norm, right? Let's assume a future world in which queer theology is the norm. It is still inherently liminal because it would necessarily, in order to remain queer theology, it would necessarily remain striving to be more inclusive.
Right.
Therefore in flux, therefore liminal.
So Winnipeg.ca has a queer theory from the Sage Dictionary of Cultural Studies. Queer theory is a term that has been applied to a body of work that has explored gay, lesbian, and bisexual life experience. Crucial to queer theory is the recovery of the concealed and repressed presence of gay and lesbian actors and activities within social and cultural life. More broadly, queer theory has explored the processes through which sexual identities are constituted within contemporary culture. Here, queer theory has advanced anti-essentialist claims regarding the cultural construction of sexual identities, including their plurality and ambivalence. And I think that last part is actually the most important, not the sexual identity or gender. Those are important, but they're not the most.
Repeat it
Because
again?
queer theory has advanced anti-essentialist claims regarding the cultural construction of sexual identities, including their plurality and ambivalence. I actually think the anti-essentialist claims of queer theory are actually the most important ones of all, because they're the ones that are least heard.
Yeah. And that,
which is why queering the body is actually an important process to understand regarding Odin, regarding your wolf spirits, regarding most any god you can look at and you want to boil them down to an essential feature. That's essentialism, and queer theory says that ain't cool. And here's why.
And I think, and the thing, why I think polytheist theologies, as a rule, not a hard and fast rule, but by and large, are and should continue to strive to be, are queer and should strive to be increasingly queer, is because the emphasis is not on essentialism. It's not what is, it is on relationship. Yes. Both relationship between and within, right? My relationship with myself is part of my theology, right? Who am I is an ever-changing, ever-growing question in my queer theology. And that is a part of the theology as much as who, and also because the answer to that question is answered in large part by who am I in relationship to those around me. And that's not to say that, because there is a way to take that into an extremely toxic.
Sure. So the point, the thing about queer theology, though, is that it, in part, it is not a reactionary theology. Okay. First off, it is to, let me clarify. Queer theology is not a reactionary philosophy. It is a reclaiming of the diversity of understanding. Queer theology is inclusive of identity, sexuality, and gender, ethnicity, etc., etc., etc. What it's not is a boiling down of essential characteristics in one fashion or another. Right. It looks at the whole. And part of the reason that it abrogates norms is because we're not living in a society where looking at a person as a sum of their community is a thing. And we're also looking at a very hyper-individualistic society where your choices are your own. You're free to make your own choices. If my choices exist in this box and my identity exists outside of this box, by definition, even if my sexuality is as straight as a fucking arrow, I'm queer per the norms of that society.
Yeah.
Pagans are inherently... Take all the political and machinations and everything else aside, paganism itself is queer to this society precisely because it posits there are other options. It's a very broad definition of queer, because queer being transverse in this case, queer being non-essentialist.
Yeah, I think that you are mostly right, except that there are cases where paganism is used in service of or to reestablish hegemony.
Yes, hegemony.
Which would make it non-queer to my mind by definition.
So I get that. I would say the normative features of paganism in general are queer. And for no other reason than it crosses, it transverses the norms of behavior and identity, etc. Particulars of theology, absolutely. Like Gerald Gardner's original conception of Wicca, from a gender and sexuality perspective, are not revolutionary. The very notion that he engendered, if you'll pardon the pun, through his Wicca, that eventually became the mass movement that it is in various parts, has been very queer. And one of the things that I've been very delighted to see within Gardnerian circles is a literal intentional queering of their own philosophy, to where the gender norms and sexualities are starting to matter less and less. And it's more of a question of what are you bringing to the table, energetically speaking.
That's good. I'm honestly really glad to hear that, because frankly, I don't fuck with Wicca because there's some issues.
Shit. Yeah. Dude, I'm an initiated Georgian Wiccan. I get it.
Yeah.
Like, it was one of the issues I had, besides the fact that, yeah, so I can't talk about that. But anyway,
no, you're fine.
My brain just was like, dog, you got oaths.
Yeah, no, you're good. I'm glad your brain did that. No, and like I wasn't strictly disagreeing. It was more of a
no, but
yes,
particulars matter.
Yeah.
Like, right. The thing about queer theology is it's fucking new. There's very little that is accepted in academic circles about it. A lot of the queer theorists are on the outs, or they're so outside the norm that they're literally, not only are they queer, but they're queer to the academic institution.
Which is also, I will say, it's also extremely funny to me. I acknowledge that is a thing. It's also very funny to me because the academy that I came up in, Francis Marion University. I don't know if it's changed. Oof. I doubt it has. But Francis Marion University, the English department where I learned a huge amount of this, the almost all of the English staff was either queer themselves or working within queer theory spaces, to the point that I thought that this was just the norm.
Oh my gods, you were fucking lucky. Holy shit.
Like, and in many ways, like, I also legitimately, one of my mentors at the time had me come in and teach an entire section of his course, like only for one day. But like, he was like, yeah, I want to be able to write a good letter of recommendation for you. So you're going to come teach and I'm going to observe you teaching.
Oh, honey.
And yeah, no,
that's amazing.
Like Marxist theory. It was great.
So, like, it's funny you mentioned Marx, because, like, most of my interactions with people in an academic setting were with strict dialectical materialists.
Mm-hmm.
And I find that shit fucking boring, to be perfectly blunt with you. What I found really cute and funny was one of these Marxists, like, I was in an existentialist course, and I needed to drop it because I had to focus more on math, because I needed the math. I didn't need the existentialism. And they were like, did we drive you out of the class? We didn't mean to be so... Like, no, honey. Your theories are really boring.
Yeah.
I've read Marx. It's not that deep. I'm sorry.
It's also funny that you covered a lot of Marx and existentialism, because I would not call Marx an existentialist.
He's not, but like the problem with so many of the Russian philosophers is you have to have an understanding of Engels and Marx. So like...
Yeah, okay, that is fair. I think that's...
The problem being is that it turned into a let's stroke off the corpse of Marx session, as opposed to let's talk about why this particular thing that Kafka's talking about is fucking terrifying and horrible, because that's less comfortable than stroking off the corpse of Marx.
Yeah.
Now that I've given you all of that image in your head.
Honestly... I was an English major for 4 years. Trust me.
Christ.
Yeah. No. Remind me probably during the after party to tell stories about the therapy sessions that were my 400 level crit theory course, as we were all diving into Marx and Derrida. Usually,
you got a level left to circle jerk.
It was less that. It was more like existentialist.
God, I'm so sorry.
Yeah, it was like, but why does anything matter? What the hell?
Stop blowing Nietzsche for 5 seconds.
We're all basically tackling these ideas for
I
the
know.
first or third time, right? And these
At least you didn't read St. Anselm for the third fucking time in a row.
I don't even know who that is.
You don't wanna.
I was gonna say, don't tell me. I don't want to know.
Just look up St. Anselm if you ever like really fucking hate yourself.
I'm all right. No, I am to this day, and I am to this day a Derrida fanboy. Like, I recognize that he was not correct in everything. I recognize that he has many problems. I still really like Derrida. I really like post-structuralist and deconstructionist philosophy. I think it's very fun. I think it's very useful.
Sorry, there's only so much wanking and navel gazing I can indulge in.
I mean, you're not wrong.
I know I'm not wrong, and I know what's more funny is that you post-structuralist fucks have to acknowledge I'm correct because, god damn it,
Yep.
Derrida is so far up his own ass, his breath is farts.
Mm-hmm. It's also great because he acknowledges that. Right?
I know, but gods love him because
Yep.
he was such an ass. Anyway,
Yeah.
but back on queer theology.
Yeah, queer theology better than Lacan. That's not the point. Both Derrida and queer theology are better than Lacan.
Oh no, fuck! I had a comp class, and then I had another class in basics of theology or philosophy, excuse me, where we had to cover Kantian deontology, and I fucking hated it.
No, not Kant. Sorry, I was saying Lacan.
Oh, my bad. I'm sorry. I have a huge hate boner for Kant.
I mean, no, that's fair. No, Lacan is what happens when you mix a bunch of French philosophy with a lot of drugs and some not great understandings of Freud. It's bad. It's if Freud was worse and much more psychedelic.
Dog, that sounds like hell.
Yeah, no, I despise Lacan. That's not the point.
So anyway, queer theology.
Queer theology. So inherently revolutionary. And I will say this. Let me say this as a challenging statement. The presence of queer gods does not make your religion or theology queer.
No, that is actually a really fucking important point because any asshole can pick up an ostensibly queer theology and de-queer it.
Yes. And like, for example, Odin, I acknowledge, is a very queer god. A lot of people, Josie says, Freud didn't even have a good understanding of Freud. Yet, yeah. Freud was also half out of his mind on drugs most of the time. That's not the point. Moving on from Freud before Sarenth and I both go on a rant. And different rants.
Honestly, like as a gateway drug, Freud's nice, but like, can we stop the hero worship for a bit?
Entirely.
Entirely, like
Freud. I'll say it. Freud was a bad person. Like he did much more harm than good.
I'll agree, and I say this as somebody who like sees some use in understanding the id, ego, superego, but that's like saying I think that Maslow had really neat ideas, but he totally stole his shit from Blackfoot people, and then inverted the fucking pyramid because he didn't understand it.
Right. That's like saying, yeah, no, I think Jung had some really neat ideas. He stole most of them from Hindu. He stole most of them from Hindu theology. Like that's what happened. Jung stole most of his ideas from brown people and then rebranded them. It's fine.
That's the actual understory of modern psychology, folks. Like, yeah. Anyway,
but yeah. So let's take Odin for example.
Sure.
Putting aside the people who turn Odin into either God or Jesus or both, because their theology is almost always fucked and non-consistent. Yeah. Like putting those people to the side, merely worshiping Odin, even in a roughly historical context, does not make your theology queer.
No, No.
It is the revolutionariness of Odin as disabled, or Odin as queer, and I'm using that in the gender and sexuality sense.
Correct.
Right? It is acknowledging that is and I'm going to go to an essentialist place with this for just a moment, but that
Well,
gets
this is. Can I just really quick interject?
Yeah, please.
If you do not have binaries, you cannot talk about what's between them.
Fair. No, fair. Yeah.
You have to have, okay, at the very least, you need to have points of reference.
Yeah. No, that's fair.
Please continue. Sorry.
No, it's the especially since we were just talking about Derrida, the deconstructionist in me was like, but no, you're as a
but yes, because deconstructionism doesn't work unless you have an established order first.
Yes. And also, yes.
And for another reason than to table flip it.
Yeah, you need at least a reference point in functional life. Even if all binaries are false, which I believe is true, which we can get into why that's also false because deconstruction. Not now. Never mind.
So the point being is that inherently worshiping Odin is not a queer thing. Worshiping Odin as a composite entity, whether through his gender or through his disability or whether through his sexuality, is.
Yes. And it is.
But why?
But why? And the why is important.
It's right? Critical.
The why is the thing. The why is what makes it queer. The also how can make it queer, but that's
correct.
Right into why I think. The why you are worshiping Odin, is it just Odin because he's chief of the gods? Okay, that's not queer. Is it Odin?
It's actually patriarchal in that case.
It's really patriarchal.
Which isn't okay. Worshiping God because he's a chieftain is not a bad thing. However, if the only reason you're worshiping him is because he's the boss, that is patriarchal and hierarchical.
Right. And I don't think that those are necessarily bad things. I think in context, in a modern context, I do think those are bad things, but I don't think that they're inherently bad things.
And that's the point of a lot of this nuance. Because once you actually get into the woods as a practitioner, once you've developed your center, I'm sorry, I'm trying to tie these disparate points together. The point of asking yourself what the center means in a polytheist context is so that when you encounter other theologies or your own theology, you can not only quantify it, but qualify it as, this is queer. Why is it? It has these characteristics. It exists in this spectrum of understanding, of sexuality, of gender, of politic, of relationship. And I think, honestly, the thing that really differs a queer theology from a non-queer theology is relationship, because the queer relationship is inclusive.
Yeah.
At its core.
Yeah.
Even if individual queer people are shit at this point, because let's be perfectly fucking blunt, white queers are shit at this.
Yeah.
Like, just literally, like, watch FD Signifier's YouTube video on Dave Chappelle and why white queers sometimes just don't fucking get it. Like, but the point being is that the relationship itself is queer. It is not necessarily that I want to fuck Odin. It is, how do I relate to the queerness of this god, the queerness of myself, the center that is polycentrism? How does my center relate to that other center? And in what fashion does it pull and push?
Yeah.
Sorry, please go ahead.
No, absolutely. No, you're good. You made that point very well. Damn, I put my finger up so I would remember a thing, and then it disappeared anyway.
I'm so sorry.
No, you're fine. That wasn't you. That was it's back. But yeah, I think that there's part of what makes queer theology queer is also the implications, right? Following that all the way through, right? So as kind of a thought experiment, okay, I worship Odin because he is queer. Or I worship Odin and acknowledge that he is queer. Both of these things are valid starting points, right? Cool. if I am acknowledging and worshiping this God that has these queer elements to them, what does that mean for my other relationships? What does that mean for my relationships with the rest of my cosmology, physical and non-physical? And
Right, because the implication of queer theology is there should be a manifest effect.
Yeah.
It is not enough to have an intellectual engagement with this God through a queer lens.
Right.
I must actually embody in some fashion, even if I am never going to, and I'm using this as a very broad example, even if I'm never going to cross-dress, by engaging with Freyr through the unmanly clanging of bells, I'm making reference to a historical document, even if I never interact with Freyr, my theology may still be queer because of the relationship that I hold or what the implications of that relationship bring into my life.
Well, and that implications thing is a very significant part of it, because if you, through your theology, come to a place where, okay, I am worshiping Freyr, and part of that is the unmanly clanging of bells and understanding of him as a queer deity, and then someone else that you see, either incidentally or intimately in your life, shows up in a thing that would be considered cross-dressing, your reaction to them, as informed by your theology, by your understanding of Freyr, if it is changed for the positive, for the inclusive,
right,
it is now queer theology.
So,
and I think that is a capital G good thing.
Sure, because the effect is a manifest good not only for yourself, but for these people that you hold relationship with and for wider society, because the inclusivity enables more diversity of identity, opinion, and expression.
Yeah.
Among a great many other things. It just could be they're fucking smoking hot and they happen to look good as a man or a woman on the stage. The thing about queer theology too is it's so new that it's so in development, and the thing that it transverses is everything.
Yeah.
Because the fact that I am actually disabled is a queering of my body. And it's not something that you can outwardly see unless I say something about it, because I'm a diabetic. I am queered in some cases. It's dicey. But I'm queer sexually and gender-wise. But, like, there are layers to that queerness that I have to reinforce because I look like a cornbread country motherfucker with a shaved head and a fucking beard. I look a certain way when I wear these tattoos.
Yep.
I queer intentionally because unless I don't, I am subsumed.
Yep.
So therefore, my theology actually needs to be an expression of these queered relationships. Not because I have something to prove to somebody else, but because if this is who I am and what I am, then the theology must too be an expression of that center, that polycentric polytheism, right?
Yeah.
And if you're straight and you're about as straight as fucking arrow and you are actually perfectly able, don't worry. One day the disability is going to come for your ass if you live long enough.
Well, okay, even assume that it doesn't. Even assume that you are able-bodied.
Assume you go into the grave perfectly fucking normal.
Like, let's assume that someone is straight and able-bodied and neurotypical and everything else perfectly centered until the day that they die, right? They walk out, get hit by a bus at 50, and that is a thing that could happen, right?
No, I'm sorry. This is wow. You went from able to disabled pretty fucking quick.
But like, let's assume that happens.
But it does. Like,
that person's theology could still be absolutely queer. Right?
Should indeed be reckoned as queer, even if they present no outward signs. Well, because queerness is not fucking performance.
No. And let's put aside. Yes, you are correct. But also,
sorry.
No, you're fine. I was making a different point. Let us assume that this person identifies as straight, neurotypical, able-bodied,
Sure.
cisgendered. This person's theology can still be queer because
Absolutely.
it's not your particular self that makes your theology queer. That would be counter to the inclusivity that is necessary for queer theology.
I am particularly thinking of our dear friend, the straightest, whitest,
We're both thinking
Mayo motherfucker, Jason, who is also simultaneously some of the most queer motherfucker we've ever met.
He genuinely is in the queer theology sense, not in the
queer theology sense. He is the most white bread, cornbread motherfucker I've ever met. Like, this motherfucker is like 6'2" and can take apart a cow as soon as look at it.
Yep, he's a very sweet guy. We've had him on the show multiple times.
He's a darling man.
Good.
In any other context, I thought he'd be as gay as the day is long.
Right, and that's kind of part of what I'm saying is like your queer theology can drive you to behave in a way that is queer even if you are not, right? That's the non-essential part of it, right? It's not about and that's also a little complicated because things like, well, no, I was born this way. I didn't choose to be
which is of itself potentially gender essentialist, but
yeah, right. Like, I didn't choose to be non-binary. I didn't choose to be
well, I was born this way. Well, if I had never heard the term non-binary, would I know what the fuck I am?
True. But also I do think that there is a part of me that would never fit into the gender binary as it exists, even if I was in a no, I shouldn't say that. Because that's not true. Can
I just say that not only is your identity, but your journey is a valid expression of your queerness?
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Because, like, one of the things that has haunted me in my case has been I don't feel queer enough.
Well, let me one, that's extremely valid. I never feel queer enough, but that's not the point. Let me use myself as an example. You know me as a queer person. You know me as
absolutely. When
you first knew me, you knew me as a man.
Sure.
But
there was always something.
Sure, you might have been able to. Your queerdar might have said, there was something off. But when you first knew me, if you don't, Emily Hall says, if you don't have the term, you can still be aware that you don't fit under the terms which is absolutely true, and it has been very much my experience. I was older than 25 before I even had approaching the terminology, and I still don't have the terminology to put myself in because I don't think labels work very well, but also because I don't have labels currently that work for me even well.
I want to say, Maleck, that it was a blessing and a sacred moment to crack your egg. Because not only was it cracking your egg, but in accepting you, I could accept myself. And that's the thing about queer theology, that honestly, for me as a person who is a-center in that polycentric polytheism, because when we start gravitationally pulling on each other and saying you are valid in your queerness, whether it's sexuality, whether it's identity, whether it's religious understanding, when we say you are valid in this understanding of gods, ancestors, Vetir, your souls, that pool, that hamingya that we are building as community gives us the luck, the Megan, to self-actualize in ways that are dynamically powerful unto ourselves, absent of the wider society. It gives us, within our circles, the ability to actualize what and who we are.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that revolution of radical acceptance of self is a powerful, needed component of queer theology.
I agree. I would also say that a necessary part of this is the acceptance that these things are impermanent and not just can but will change.
Yes.
Both as general states of being, but also from moment to moment. In a certain moment, I'm going to use possession as the example.
Sure. Please do, because you're fucking seen enough.
So done enough.
Right.
Increasingly am being asked to do more. It's fine. That's a personal. We'll get to that. That's an after party topic. So in a possessory ritual, person walks into the ritual. The person who is to be possessed. Let's assume a ritual where 1, all parties are consenting, and 2, it is pre-planned who is going to be possessed in the ritual.
If it would help, you have permission to use examples from my oracular work.
Thank you, but I'm not going to, because I want to keep this hypothetical.
Okay.
Person walks into a ritual who knows ahead of time that they're going to be possessed. Everyone knows that they're going to be possessed and has consented to this. They walk into the ritual. Before they walk into the ritual, they are themselves. They walk into the ritual, they may or may not be themselves. During the ritual, they are, at least for some moment, either themselves and someone else, or just merely someone else. Then they walk out of the ritual and are ideally themselves again. Right? In the broadest terms, they walk into the ritual, they are themselves. During the ritual, they are not themselves. They walk out of the ritual, they are themselves again. This is an inherently, to my mind, an inherently queer thing. This is a break not just from social norms in the sense of, well, the hegemonic theology does not allow for things like possession, or does not allow for things like positive possession, but also the subsuming of one's identity into the divine is an inherently queer thing in my mind.
If I may.
Yeah.
In a very real sense, you are abrogating your identity. Not that you are. So abrogate is a word that I'm using very intentionally because I fucking looked the definition up. It is to repeal or do away with. It is to evade. We believe the board is abrogating its responsibility to its shareholders. So you are abrogating your identity in favor of this identity you're bringing forth. Please go ahead.
And it's important because it's not just I'm breaking the norms. It's I can be this.
I am embodying the breaking of norms.
Right. I can be more than just who I am observed to be. I can be more than who I just believe myself to be. I can be someone else entirely. I can be someone higher, lower, someone else.
I want to point a very clear line. Mm-hmm. It is not mere belief. I can believe a million impossible things before I've had breakfast. But once I've had that breakfast, my understanding of things solidifies somewhat because I'm no longer fucking hungry.
Right. But no, you're right. There is I can be more than just myself. I can be someone else, and then I can return to myself. And that is an inherently queer thing.
The embodiment of possessory experience is one of the factors for why Sather was treated as queer. Historically speaking, treated as the other, treated as dangerous, because you were calling in. There is a Varthloker, a gardening song or an enticing song for this spirit or group of spirits or God or group of gods to come into you and use you. This was dangerous, not only from the perspective of the spirits, the gods, whomever is speaking, but from the I am relinquishing control in a very systematically controlled environment, because we systematically control this environment because that's how we fucking live in this Arctic fucking environment, right?
Yeah.
We have a stratified and very delineated way of progression, in part because that's how we fucking live. So when we come to a very stratified place within ourselves, and then we intentionally disrupt that by saying, speak what you will, do what you will, as long as it does, no physical lasting harm to other people, do what must be done. The act of possession allows spirit, unfiltered through history, unfiltered through our personal biases, unfiltered ideally. I am saying this fucking ideally because God knows that mediums occasionally intervene.
Yeah.
But the queering of the body through the act of possession, whether the entity in particular has identifying sexual or gender characteristics that match your own. And I have held what are called male and female gods in my body. What matters is that the other person is fucking listening. Yeah. And that the other person is going to integrate those experiences. And that the queerness of the transaction between the deity and I, or the ancestor, or the spirit and I, matters less than the manifest effect on the community.
Oh, certainly.
But it is still important because the community trusts that this body knows what the fuck it's doing.
Yeah, no, certainly. Leaving the discernment aside, because while important, I think is mildly distracting from the current discussion, if you will.
Absolutely. Please go ahead.
I think the act of possession itself is in most cases a very queer thing that, as with all things, can be turned to the services of hegemony.
It can.
Right, like that is absolutely a thing that can be done, and I think does happen, but I think
if I may.
Yeah, please.
Queer theology, indeed any theology, runs the risk of increasing the bottom line of the hegemony, if for no other reason than the hegemony is a creature that just eats.
It is a beast that eats, yes.
And it will happily eat anything, regardless if it's bullshit or genuine. It doesn't care at this point. The creature that is modern capitalism eats. And if it thinks it can turn you into a profitable venture, it will. So whether you are revolutionary and queer and you are with the best of intentions, the capitalist beast will fucking eat you. The latest example that I can think of off the top of my semi-drunk head is the new Spider-Man movie where Hobby, the punk spider, is inculcated into a situation where it is a revolutionary element within a capitalistically produced piece of art. And that revolutionary element is by itself tamed down by the fact that it is within Sony Pictures.
Yeah.
The most radical elements of punk cannot escape the net of capitalism when capitalism is the being that expresses that radicalism. Because it is always within the framework of what that capitalism finds acceptable.
And also in a duality, in a certain sense, by being within, it is also infiltrating from the inside. And
it is, which is part of the danger when these capitalists decide to amplify our voices and messages, and which is why they don't fucking do it a lot. Yeah. Or they do it within exceptionally controlled circumstances.
Right. And so it's okay. We have been going for about an hour and 45 at this point.
Correct.
And not to say that we are not having a very good discussion, because we are. But we've been going for an hour and 45 at this point. Let's hit some closing thoughts.
So I think for me, the thing about polycentric polytheism and the centers is that, yes, your gravitational pull may be very, very different. Whether you're talking about yourself as a being in comparison to a god, or yourself as a comparison to a big spirit like a river or a lake, you are never going to drain that lake on your own. No human being can do it. You have to have equipment. For instance, whether you compare yourself to the grand narratives that Hollywood puts out year on year, or whether you compare yourself, you are a small person, but that does not mean that you are inconsequential, because your story, your beingness itself can have radical impact in ways that you will never see in your lifetime. But being a living ancestor yourself, that polycentric polytheism encourages you to live the best life possible, because through your example, through your lived experiences, through the words that you put out on paper, on video, on audio, into the ears and the minds and the hearts of the people that are around you, polycentric polytheism says that every center is important.
Yes.
And therefore, none of us are unimportant.
Yeah. I was going to use my closing thoughts to push back, but you summed it up perfectly. It is not the impact that you have as an individual that makes your existence important. It is your existence as an individual that makes your existence important. It is not your gravitational pull that makes your center important in the polycentrism. It is the fact that it exists. And that is what makes it beautiful in and of itself.
What makes your theology queer is the radical inclusivity of your theology, not your material conditions, not even where you come from or how you are.
Yeah.
If love is an everyday choice, if love is therefore an everyday choice, then therefore embodying queer theology in your actions, in your word, in your body, in your spirit, in your souls, that is an everyday choice as well. And it's through this process of not only individuation, but collectivization, you include yourself within this continuum of ancestors reaching back to before the beginning. Mm-hmm. From the eldest ancestor itself to you. There is a line. There are lines. There is an entire web of people, of beings, of spirits, of gods, of ancestors to tap into, to say, you know what, I may not have my tribe today, but I am building my tribe now, who will be part. Not who wants to be part, who will be. And that is an everyday question.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You are a living work.
All right. I think that is good for now. I do believe that we're going to have a part 3 on our theology session.
Oh, absolutely. Because we haven't even gotten really like into the implications of like queer theology. We haven't gotten into the implications of what polytheism like really like when we actually apply it to society or in the individual.
Yeah.
We've gotten like broad base. I think we can definitely explore this further.
Yeah. I do think we are going to probably call it at 3 episodes of theology, because I don't think we want to become a theology podcast.
In the meantime, though, if people have things that they want us to actually cover in particular, please hit us up on our Discord.
Please hit us up on Discord. And that might be things that you want us to talk about on the Discord with you in real time. It might be things you want us to cover on air. It might be both. We can do all of the above.
Absolutely.
So please feel free to hit us up on our Discord. That is 3 Pagans on Tap. And for those of us who are currently on the Discord and who have time and space, we will see you on the after party. And thank you all for being with us as we ramble in various states of drunkenness about, a lot of things.
I think that, speaking as a queer person to queer people, even if you are straight as a fucking arrow, the beauty of expression in and of itself, of being in a place where we can express, of being who and what we are, thank you for that gift.
Yeah.
And Maleck, thank you for the gift of that camaraderie, of that safety. And thank you to all the people who join us, whether on the show or off the show. Thank you for the gift of camaraderie, because it is uncomfortable in a lot of ways to explore that, to look at yourself and go, am I queer? And whether you come away from I am straight as a fucking arrow or I am queer as a fucking $3 bill, that's great. Those are both valid expressions.
asking the question itself is uncomfortable.
That is, especially in a culture which demands hegemony.
Yeah.
The very
As
fact of
Spencer
questioning.
says, every possible in various states of drunkenness about various things. Look, it's true. I say a lot of true things very often.
Without this show, I would not have questioned my heterosexuality or my. Well, I mean, I wasn't hetero when I came on the show, but that's beside the point.
You wouldn't have
But
questioned your gender presentation and identity nearly to the degree that you currently are.
no, and you know what? I'm sad that Carr left us, but he also, alongside you, provided a safe space where I could do that.
Yeah.
Especially in the early shows where I was like, I don't know about this thing, but like, I think I might be queer. Like the fact that we have a space where people can honestly question and theologically, spiritually, gender, identity, all of it is up for grabs.
Mm-hmm.
And you are still the center of your particular polycentric polytheism.
Yeah.
And you're valid. Yeah.
And this may go without saying, but it doesn't go without saying. I want to say it anyway. We do our best to embody the paradox of intolerance in that we are doing everything in our power, which we are not perfect, and we will not be perfect.
No.
But we're doing everything in our power, and we'll continue to learn and grow in this of being as inclusive as possible, except for those who are uninclusive. If there are ways that we're fucking up, tell us.
Please.
We want to know.
Because I might not be aware.
And flatly, Sarenth can tell you, how many times have I come to you and said, hey, dude, you fucked up.
Yep. And likewise.
Yeah.
We call each other on our shit. We fully expect that our audience members, whether you're here for one episode or whether you're here for 30 or 41 in this case, we expect you to say, hey, if you fucked up, this is where you fucked up, and this is where we want you to improve. And if you can't even vocalize where you want us to improve, just say, hey, this is fucked, dude.
Yeah. And if you're not comfortable saying that publicly, if you want to say, if you want to say it to either one of us privately,
right,
that's fine. Whatever the case might be. And also, if we have not provided a safe enough space for people to feel comfortable voicing concern to us, I apologize and strive to do better.
Likewise. And the thing about, especially this Pride Month, especially in the time that we are in, we want to make not only the most inclusive community that we can, with admittedly a small community. I mean, this is a small vlog, but we want to make a place where people of all walks of life feel comfortable being who and what they are.
Yeah.
And if we are not doing that, we need to know.
Yeah.
Because we would like to improve. We want to be the best version of this show and ourselves that we can be.
Mm-hmm.
And we cannot do that outside of community because we're just two individuals without community.
Yep. And on that note, I actually want to say a thing. And I promise y'all, we are going to the after party soon. But
I've got night prayers to do, so yeah, we're going to be leaving soon.
Yeah. So Finn said, you're not the only one who's sad that Carr left. I do want to say that Carr as a person is an individual who is as valuable as any other. Carr's actions have not always been good, flat out. Carr is a complicated figure, both in his behavior on our show
and elsewhere.
And elsewhere, right? This is a complicated factor. Certainly, I do think that Carr said some stuff on our show that wasn't okay, both on air and in after parties. And I did not do my job in calling that and making this the safest space possible.
And likewise, as a co-host, I share responsibility for that. It is not the blame of any one person.
Yeah.
And also, Carr is a fucking 50-something-year-old adult.
Yeah.
And by this point, should fucking know better.
But Carr's an adult who knows what he is doing and would have done better in many cases. He is also a complicated human, just like every other, and
Just like us.
I do not think that people are inherently bad or good. I think that Carr has made some bad decisions. I think Carr has made some phenomenal decisions, and it's complicated, and I acknowledge that. And if people decide to not listen to us or give us space and time because we had Carr on the show,
That is legit.
I similarly, if I have said something fucked up and people want to not listen to us because of that as well, I can't fault you for that either. Like,
Ditto.
so, we are all doing the best that we can, and we're trying to learn and grow. And certainly we could have done better, but we
could have done a whole lot worse.
Right. We could have done a whole lot worse, but we are where we are now, and we're doing the best we can. And that is not to remove responsibility, but it is to say we are where we are now, and we're doing the best we can.
I have to say, I really appreciate this sentiment, Finn.
Yeah.
And, my blessings and my best wishes go out to Carr, and especially to the people whose lives he's touched.
Yeah.
And I will see you all in the after show. I really appreciate all of you showing up, and I appreciate those of you who are listening after the fact. I hope that we've said something useful, profound, and something that kind of makes you think.
Yeah. If that's all that we accomplish is that you think a little bit, even if your mind is not changed at all, right? If the only thing that happens after you listen to the show is that you are re-solidified in your current belief system, cool. That means you examine something.
Right.
That makes me
That's
happy.
a valid response.
Right. Like, that makes me happy. So that said, Sarenth has to go say prayers with his family. I'm going to make myself another drink and then jump on the after party. So I will see folks in the Discord who are going to the Discord. If not, I hope that you join us in the Discord in the future. Thanks, folks. Have a wonderful night, and see you then.
Best of all.